The most common birth position in the hospital is on your back. And it's most likely going to lead to a C-section, or at the very least, have you panicking, pushing too fast just to avoid that C-section. Too often you're told that your baby is stuck. Too often you're told that you've been pushing for too long. And too often moms get wheeled down into the operating theater because they didn't push their baby out in time to avoid that C-section, and baby got stuck. Hi, my name is Carly Bonderud, and this is the Cesarean Trap series where I go deep into everything that you need to know to avoid the unnecessary C-section. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about my story and how I almost had a C-section. However, because of things that I did, which I now refer to as the empowered birth method of how to think, not just what to think, I was able to avoid that fate. Many women are not so lucky. Many women in my position have had C-sections, being told they've been pushing for too long, and it's a C-section. And oftentimes it's because they were put on their backs to birth. The other one is that they get the episiotomy, or they have the vacuum or forceps assisted delivery, or they're just pushing way too hard. You may want to check out the other videos in my series if you are not familiar with those. And if you are brand new to me, then let me just tell you a little bit more about what you really need to know about the cesarean traps. So first of all, what you're going to want to do if you are brand new to me is you're going to want to check out the first video in the Cesarean Trap series. It's going to tell you more about what a cesarean trap is, how to spot it, and how to avoid it. It's also going to tell you more about how these deep dive masterclasses work. And it's going to tell you what you need to know moving forward. You see, I have 3 paths for getting the empowered birth method. And right now you're on the do-it-yourself path, which means it's completely free. You don't have to put in a name and email right now. You don't have to go and subscribe to anything. You don't have to buy a course. If at any point, however, you do want to go deeper, then I do have other paths available, and you're going to want to know more about that. So make sure you check out my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide, because that's going to give you a deeper overview of what the empowered birth method is, how I came to it, the mistakes that a lot of moms are making, especially if they're trying for a VBAC or if they are a seasoned mom who has been traumatized, but also that first C-section as the first-time mom is often unnecessary, and you fell into what's called the natural birth traps. So if you are a seasoned mom and you would like to avoid a C-section, or you have already had more than one C-section, or you've had one C-section and you would like a VBAC, then the information at empoweringmomsbirth.com is going to help you, because it's helped a lot of my clients recognize where they got tricked. You see, I recognized a long time ago, way back when I was giving birth to my first baby, that I didn't want to have a C-section, and I didn't even want to be in the hospital. Inside of my book, Your Empowered Birth, which is that little blue book behind me, is my entire story and also the steps I took to reclaim my birth. It also provides a map for you. And here's the options. You can either go and listen to the book right now by going to the playlist on the YouTube channel and checking out the Empowered Birth Book playlist. And if you would like a copy of the book, it is also available on Amazon. I recommend you having a hard copy. The reason for that is because you can flip to different pages, you can mark up the pages, you can put little note things in the tabs to be able to refer to the book often. There's just something about having a physical copy in your possession. There's also questions within the book, journal prompts that help you come to your own birth vision. Now, this is incredibly important groundwork for all of my clients. In fact, when I get on a call with a client, I'm usually asking, have you read the book? Have you done some questions in the book? And I usually will ask them those same questions. So this saves you time and energy so that you don't need to get onto a call with me unless absolutely necessary. And that is actually the first level that you pay. I have a policy of information is free and I only charge for access to me. So you're free to binge watch these master classes. Some of them are going to be longer than others. And if you go into the Cesarean Traps playlist, you're going to find the full list of those master classes. I also have other master classes as well in the Empowered Birth series. So this is season 3. And I'm going to be referring to other master classes in this particular video. Typically what I do is I lay a foundation, and then after that, I add nuance to it. I add more videos, I answer questions, I create more guides as needed, I create mini challenges, and I create these deep dive master classes. So as the Empowered Birth series continues, you're going to find that I'm going to be covering a variety of different topics. And I have a list of freebie guides on my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/freebies, if you want a long list of all the different things that I have on offer. You can also reach out to the team, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, if you have a specific question. You can also just comment, but we don't see the comments as often as we would be able to respond to your request directly. And there's some things you just don't want to put on social media for everybody to scrutinize, which I get. Particularly if you're birthing out of the box, you don't want to open yourself up to criticism because that can lead to you feeling like there's something wrong with you. And with the majority of births happening on the back, this is one of those things that people don't really question, but I questioned it. And I was also experiencing firsthand just how difficult it is to push a baby up the hill. So now that you understand a little bit of more what's going on with the cesarean traps, if you were brand new to me, then that helped you. If you already knew it, then it's just a refresher. Now we're going to go into what we're covering in this class, because I have already covered birth on the back inside of the Natural Birth Trap series in season 2. So if you want a full overview, I did cover that. I also talked about how the pelvis is not fused. I talked about how your baby actually comes down, not the textbook version that came out way back in the Industrial Revolution when men were cutting up women's bodies for science and not quite understanding what they were seeing. And they'd also burned all the midwives, or the midwives went underground, or they hung the midwives, whatever they did to the midwives. They were basically trying to get women out of the birth space so that the male doctors could take over and make all the money. And they had invented the forceps, and they had invented the episiotomy. And if women had believed that they were perfectly capable of birthing on their own without doctors, they wouldn't have been able to make this lucrative. So if you want to know more about that, I would suggest reading Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage by Rachel Reed. This also goes into a lot more detail of the history of women first birthing upright and then birthing on their backs. There's also a rumor about Louis XVI, who liked to watch his mistresses give birth. We don't actually know if that was true or not. It is a fun little feminist thing to say. But in the end, it's also the fact that queens were expected to give birth in front of a lot of people. So it is possible that birth on the back did start to happen more often, and then it trickled down. And when you look at that context, as I said, you go and check out that first video inside of Natural Birth Trap Season 2. It's one of the later ones in the playlist. You'll be able to spot it. I tend to just put the titles very easy for you to understand which one. But every single one of these masterclasses builds on previous masterclasses. And birth on the back is one of those things that it really does have a close place in my heart because of the fact that I was pushing for 3 hours. So we're going to go into why a lot of women don't see this trap coming. Well, first of all, when you are in the throes of labor and you get to the end, there's going to be a point if you're in the hospital, this typically happens in the hospital, where they're like, okay, she's starting to push, get her on the bed and get her on her back so that we can see things. So it's very fast. You often don't have time to react. Even if you put in your birth plan that you want to birth in any position other than on your back, that often gets ignored. Even if you had a partner that you said, I don't want to birth on my back, they may forget. If you don't have a doula who's strong enough or they're not present, sometimes things happen. I had hired a doula, but because of the fact that she was actually going away the week after my due date, and I didn't know what I know now as a seasoned mom, I thought, well, it should be fine. I'll have my baby by then. And I hired her. Now, she was a great doula, but it wasn't really a right fit for that first birth. I really did need someone, and I didn't quite understand what I was walking into. And I didn't understand a lot of things. I made a lot of mistakes. That's why in chapter 3, A Harsh Lesson in my book, Your Empowered Birth, I really go into those mistakes I made as a first-time mom. I later rectified those mistakes by learning things that weren't typical birth education, but more the culture of birth and what had really been going on that I didn't see. So we have a dichotomy between the natural birth community that really births at home and says, just stay home. And then we have the hospital birth community that is like, well, this is how we've always done things. And what happens in this is that doctors are trained to catch babies with moms on their backs. A lot of hospital midwives are also trained to catch babies with moms on their backs. A lot of nurses have only seen births with moms on their backs. And when you say you want to birth in a different position, they may not know effectively how to trust that position works. And if it doesn't work in the time that they think that it would work, they will then put you on your back. So what happened with me, and this is why I'm telling my story, because you can always go and watch the masterclass if you really want to know all the ways this is a trap, how this screws up your chances of having a natural birth, how this narrows the pelvis, all of that is inside of season 2, inside of the video where I talk about birth on the back. So this is a second level of a natural birth trap that I already talked about and how it could possibly lead to a cesarean. So in my case, I was very clear that I wanted to birth in any position other than on my back. And I had back labor throughout all of my labor because my baby boy, his head was facing the wrong side and he needed time to turn. So as I started to push in the tub, this is when they're like, she's pushing, she's not allowed to give birth in the tub. They drained the tub and they pulled me from the tub. And they made me walk towards the bed. And when you are in that state where your baby is already like down at 0 station, 1 station, 2 station, you can feel them in your pelvis. You can actually feel them. So it's hard to lift your leg. And so they're like, get on the bed. And I did not want to get on the bed. And what happened is my former partner came into the room and he's like, where do you want her? And picked me up and put me on the bed. Every instinct was telling me I needed to squat down and lean forward. And the medical staff, even the midwife herself, because the nurse was in the room, she was being watched and there was a certain protocol that had to be followed. So what happened is then I'm picked up and I'm put on this bed that I didn't want to be on. And this is what happens to a lot of moms is they want to be in a certain position, but because of the way that the medical system has been taught to direct the patient, and you're not actually a patient, you're a client, you're hiring them, but you're highly suggestible in labor and you're highly suggestible during the pushing and transition phase, because this is when the adrenaline is surging through your body and fear can start to show up. So what happens is that they get you onto your back. It is impossible to get off your back on your own because of the weight of the baby. And it's just really difficult to be able to advocate for yourself as well because you're trying to push your baby out. So this is again why you need to have your partner on board, because if your partner is not aware of this, they can actually be complicit. And this is what happened, is that then I was trying to push up the incline of the bed to get off of my back. And they're like, we need you to hold her legs steady. Like, we can't get her in the position we need her, and we need you to hold her legs. So they held my leg. I attempted to do pushing on my side, and they're like, it's not effective. We need to get you back on your back. And I'm like, sake, like, that's not the position I wanted to be in. So it was very difficult to push my baby out because of the fact that you're pushing a bowling ball uphill. This is not the physiological position for birth. This is not a position that you want to be in if you are having a natural birth. And I was very much aware as time went on, because the clock was right there in front of me, that if I reached a certain threshold where I wasn't pushing my baby out effectively, they were either going to give me an episiotomy or they were going to wheel me for a C-section. Oftentimes, they will start to say, your pelvis is too small, baby's too big, let's wheel you for a C-section. And so the thing is that I avoided a C-section mostly because my midwife kept encouraging me to push, because she knew how much I didn't want to have a C-section, and she was 2 years away from retirement. When someone is not as ingrained in the medical system and they're not afraid, they are less likely to force you into compliance when they know it's not right, when they trust physiological birth. And so basically, I avoided the C-section, but just barely. Let me be clear, it was just barely. I was pushing for 3 hours and I finally started to make some headway. But at the same time, it was so much more difficult to push on my back. And I do not recommend that position. It is just, it's too much. And it can damage your pelvic floor. And it can also lead to the medical system thinking if you're not pushing fast enough or effective enough, depending on their timeline, they may push you into a C-section. So there's a lot of moms that are like, I was pushing for X number of hours and nothing was happening. And they said C-section. And sometimes the cutoff is less than 3 hours. It can be 1 hour, depending on what the policies are of the hospital. And they also base this off of epidurals as well. So they're used to clients that have epidurals who need to be on their backs because they can't get into a more effective position on their own. And they're also used to catching mechanical births with the actual body of the torso, and then the baby comes out and they are sitting on a chair catching the baby. So they're not used to catching a baby in a different position. You have to advocate for yourself if you are birthing in the hospital. At a home birth, this isn't really so much of a problem. You're in your own domain. You are able to effectively birth on all fours. A lot of moms will choose water birth. I myself love water birth because I get to be weightless and I'm able to move into the positions on my own. I did end up choosing a semi-reclining position in the water at a certain point, but that was when my daughter's head was already out and I was basically just leaning back to avoid tearing because I could feel what was going on. And by doing that, it actually eased a lot of stress, and my baby shot out like a little torpedo into the water. It was not the 3 hours of pushing that I experienced with my first. And, you know, I've also watched moms who have never pushed babies out before. So you can't say that it's just because I was a first-time mom and had never pushed a baby out. I've watched clients as well who have had more effective pushing than I did. My best friend Jenny, for instance, she never got to push her first baby out. She was traumatized into a C-section after a failed induction that was also causing her a lot of trauma. Again, that story is inside of Your Empowered Birth, and I also have interviews with Jenny. So Jenny had never pushed a baby out before either, and 1 hour after arriving at the hospital, baby was coming fast and she was birthing upright. And then there's also Rebecca, who had also never pushed out her babies. She had had a C-section with her first and another C-section with her second after attempting a VBAC and getting tricked out of it. And then with her third, she was pushing her baby out at home in the water and resting between surges. And yeah, she was pushing for a while, but it wasn't like push, 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 breathe. No, it was more like when she had the urge to push, she did. And when she was resting, she'd just take a little bit of a rest and then she'd get back into her position for pushing. And then she'd lay back in the pool again. And then she would get back onto her hands and knees in the pool and she'd be pushing. And her partner caught the baby while I was holding the space as a virtual doula. So understanding that it's not that we have unproven pelvises, and it's not that first babies automatically take a long time to push out, and it's not that our uterus is ineffective, and it's not that our pelvis is too small. It's the practice of putting moms on their backs for birth. And if you've got your legs up in the air and you're flat on your back like a turtle, and people keep telling you to push, 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 this can lead to your pelvic floor getting even more tense. And then the baby's not coming fast enough. We need to wheel you in for a C-section. The other thing is that oxygen is cut off if you're on your back. You're not meant to be on your back. So if you're on your back, this can cause cord compression. This can cause it to be more difficult for your baby to navigate the birth canal. And it's just, you just don't want to do it. Try to avoid birth on your back unless your instincts tell you that that's the position that is best for you. Because baby will actually tell you, you'll instinctively feel it as long as you haven't been cut off from your senses. And this is why there's a difference between physiological birth, which is the true natural birth, and just an unmedicated birth where the medical system is controlling everything and telling you what to do, versus having an epidural. So every time you introduce a medical intervention, what's basically going to happen is that you're no longer having a physiological birth, which means you are cut off from your instincts. You're cut off from the feedback loop of your baby and your uterus and you. And you're listening to outside voices that don't actually understand physiological birth. And even as a doula, my role is really to step back and allow birth to unfold and to trust my client and to guide the partner to essentially follow the lead. And when there's fear involved, that's when things fall apart. So now you understand a little bit more. And as I said, if you want the full overview, I did already do a natural birth trap on this in season 2. So go and check that playlist as well. There's a lot of natural birth traps. And the more you understand about the natural birth traps, the more you're going to see the layers of the cesarean traps. And as we continue with the Empowered Birth series and the programs and the challenges that I put out, the more you're going to understand the nuance. But there is a lot here. And I just want to remind you that we do also have more self-study courses available. I do have a program called Your Empowered Birth Academy that takes you through the actual steps of the Empowered Birth method. There's also additional mini challenges and mini courses that enhance Academy. Academy is the core program. And in addition to that, you get a graduation call. So that means that you finish the core program. You don't have to do all the extras. It's just the core program. It's about 6 hours of actual training. And then you do the homework that's assigned with it, which is just answering some journal questions. And then what that allows you to do is have that baseline so that when we go in and look at your birth plan and look at all of the factors that are playing into it, we can pinpoint how to get you your most empowered birth and to spot any of those traps that you may not see. So that leads into the empowered birth method. How do we apply this? Well, first of all, you need to be able to get past your fear of being disliked. The fact is that if you're going into a hospital, instead of choosing to not go into the hospital at all, which is fair. I mean, sometimes we do need to go into the hospital. Sometimes there's something we want to have backup support on, or sometimes home birth just isn't feasible anymore for whatever reason. And just because you don't want to have a medicalized birth doesn't mean that you should automatically be forced into free birth. Free birth needs to be a choice, not something that you do just because you feel backed into a corner. And the thing is that even when my clients choose free birth, they also are using the hospital as backup and they're getting that training. So you need to have your backup plans. A lot of people, they're like, well, I'm just going to have a home birth and that will be fine. I thought that too. As a first-time mom, I thought that too. I said, well, you know, I don't want a hospital birth. I don't want to be birthing on my back. If that's the position that they prefer most moms to be in, that's not okay with me. I don't feel like advocating for myself. I'll hire a doula to advocate for me. I'll just take the birth classes and that will help me. I thought I was doing everything right. I was very focused on not having a C-section and not having an induction, and I managed to avoid that, but I didn't avoid the hospital. And I had been planning a home birth up until 35 weeks. So anything can shift if you are not strong in getting past your fear, and you need to be able to get past your fear of being a little bit disliked. You need to get past your fear of being seen as difficult. You need to get past your fear that other people will force you into something. That is why with the empowered birth method, mostly it's about your mindset. You need to have that mindset solid. If that mindset is shaky and it's looking on the outside for other things to save you, it's not going to help. This is where I went wrong. This is why I was on my back for 3 hours pushing, because I hadn't had my mindset strong enough to say no to that hospital birth in the first place. And I hadn't had the thought that other people may not be able to save me the way I think that they can. I was relying on other people to essentially know how to protect me from the thing I didn't want. But I didn't know what my midwife was dealing with on her side. That's why I created the birth advocacy report, which is inside of the Empowered Mom Toolkit. You just go to my website and go to the start guide, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide. That's going to give you the overview of everything that I've basically created, the mini guides, mini challenges, entry points for each one of the levels of paths of empowered birth, from the self-study path, the do-it-yourself path, and also premium coaching. So you understand all of those layers. But essentially what you need to know is that fear is the number one reason that a lot of moms end up getting tricked. It's why they get told that they have to have a C-section because the baby's having D-cells while mom is flat on her back, without questioning that maybe the reason is because they forced her on her back to push. And now there's a problem that's developed because the medical system only sees things one way. They only see pathology. It's not always their fault. So the birth advocacy report basically shows you the different categories. And I've also talked about this in season 2 of the Empowered Birth series. I talk about it a little bit in season 1, but in season 2, I talk about how the wrong nurse and the wrong doctor and the wrong support people can all derail your birth. It's like a 3-part, like, mini series within the series of the list of 20 traps. So essentially what you're going to want to do is check out that video as well. So that's step 1, is you need to get past your fear and be able to trust yourself, essentially, is what you need to do. You need to be able to trust yourself and know what position to get in, and also not care what the outside world thinks. Step 2 is you need to have your partner get past their fears of the outside world not liking what they're doing, and to support you and follow your lead. Your partner needs to be the one to say, I'm not holding her leg. She needs to be on her hands and knees. She said she doesn't want to be on her back. The reason I can see she keeps trying to get up the incline of the bed. Obviously, she doesn't want to be there. It's like, well, we can't, she's not saying anything. It's like, you think she can? I'm advocating for her. I can tell what her body language is showing. Your partner needs to be aware of your body language. So you need to have these conversations with your partner ahead of time. It's like, if they put me on my back, I'm going to be pushing up the incline of the bed to try to get off of my back. So I need you to be able to recognize that. I need you to be able to tune out whatever the medical staff are trying to do and advocate for me. Slow them down. Now, the last part of that is you need to hire a doula if you can afford it. And this is why I teach my education for free, because if you cannot afford my rates for a coaching call or for my program, then that's fine. That's fine. If you really can't afford my rates for the coaching program, the book itself is going to help you. And there's bonuses with the book as well that you can get them from the Empowered Birth Toolkit if you're signed up for the newsletter itself. And essentially what you do is you have the book, you read the book, you keep the book with you, you even pass that book on to other birth workers to show them copies of the book, encourage them to get a copy of the book as well for their possession, because this book basically bridges the gap between the natural birth dichotomy and the medical birth dichotomy and shows how we can have a more effective birth culture where moms don't get forced onto their backs anymore and moms aren't forced to go against their instincts. So hiring those outside care providers is going to help as well. So having the doula to advocate, to remind your partner, hey, I know they're doing a lot of things right now, but she doesn't want to be on her back. And we need to do something here. And it needs to be a doula who's able to advocate. So part of the Empowered Birth Method and what I teach in your Empowered Birth Academy, the core program, is you get past your fear and then how to help your partner work through their fears. And then what happens from there is you're able to advocate for yourself. So the next line of defense, of course, is since you're pushing, there's no going into the hospital at the last minute. Obviously, you're already there. But being able to have a partner who's willing to catch your baby in whatever position because they can trust it. And the doula also needs to be not squeamish about this. This is how Jenny was able to have an unassisted VBAC in the hospital, is she ended up having herself, her partner, and the doula catch the baby upright. So being able to have that level first, knowing you can catch your own baby. You don't have to be on your back because you can catch your own baby. If people are like, we won't catch the baby in that position, you can be like, fine, I'll catch the baby in this position. Like, I'll squat down. I'll make sure that when I birth the baby, they land safely. Like, you don't actually have to catch the baby. You don't have to grab the baby. You don't have to do anything. With a physiological birth, it is designed for us to be able to birth on our own if need be. You need to be able to be confident enough to birth on your own. And then hopefully you've hired a care provider who is hands off. Because if your care provider is more hands off than hands on, they're going to be able to sit on their hands and not interfere unless you really want their help on that. But if you have a medical staff that is overly anxious, you need to be able to have those advocacy skills and you need to know what you're walking into. So part of the Empowered Birth Method and with your Empowered Birth Academy, the core program, is that I teach you how to confidently say no, and I teach you how to advocate for yourself and understand the limitations of the medical system. And when you put all of that together, that allows you to know whether to actually birth on your back if you feel that's the most comfortable position for you, versus when they force you onto your back and then say, well, you know, you're not pushing your baby out fast enough and it's a C-section. And meanwhile, it's like, it's hard to push this baby out being stuck on my back because your pelvic outlet is narrowed when you're on your back. Just think about another bodily function that requires you to push something out and you're on your back. How effective would that be? There's a reason why we have a toilet. There's a reason why we don't do that in a bed or on our backs. So why is it that birth is on our backs? Well, because doctors wanted to use their tools. Okay, so now that you understand that, let's just quickly recap what we learned here. Why don't moms see this trap coming? Because it has been so ingrained into our culture. You see it everywhere. It's in TV, it's on social media, it's in movies. It's the position that, like, they have the bed in the middle of the room. The implication is that you get on that bed and you lay on that bed and you push your baby out. That is what the medical system is trained in. When you look at how they catch babies in medical training, it is with the torso laying on the back, and then the baby is just slowly coming out, and then they're learning how to maneuver. That is not physiological birth. Physiological birth is not taught in the hospital setting. In order for it to be in the hospital, you need to be able to bring that to it. Oftentimes, there are moms who want to have a physiological birth in the hospital, and that is the first physiological birth that the nurses and doctors have ever seen. They are used to moms that have the epidurals. They are used to moms birthing on their backs. They're used to moms just deferring their power to the doctor and the nurses. That's how they're trained. To shift the birth culture requires you to do something different. And that is why with the Empowered Birth Method, you need to get past your fear. You need to get your partner on board, and you need to be able to advocate for yourself. You need to be able to know that you can birth this baby with or without them. You don't have to be on your back. You can catch your own baby. If you are pushing uphill for a long time, you're going to get tired. And if there's other factors that they've put in as well, while you're birthing on your back, that can also cascade to you getting the C-section with that cascade of interventions. It just keeps building and building and building. The more interventions you have, the less likely you're going to have that physiological birth. So you really need to understand that when you interfere with the physiological process, and our birth culture is all about interfering with the physiological process, and it's all about fear, then this is what leads to you laying there for 3 hours. And there was a point where I was afraid that I was going to have a C-section. I'm like, this is too hard. Like, I'm not able to do it. This is too hard. And then I was thinking, what happens if I just give up? What happens if I'm just like, I'm tired, I can't do this anymore? And I gave into that C-section. And I actually imagined myself in the operating room. And I imagine myself afterwards holding my baby with that C-section that I never wanted. And I was like, what's that going to do to me psychologically to have a C-section? And there was this spark inside me that screamed no. And that's when I got the force to start pushing really hard. But I shouldn't have had to push at that level. That was actually damaging my pelvic floor. And, you know, it doesn't have to be that way. We shouldn't have to purple push our babies out, and we shouldn't have to force it just to avoid a C-section. So understanding that now, we've basically come to the end. So thank you so much for watching this video. Next week, we are going to be talking about Cesarean Trap number 15, which is a previous C-section. So for VBAC moms everywhere, you're going to want to watch this video because I'm going to be giving you additional tips. I'm going to share some extra resources with you, and I'm going to tell you what I've told my clients about their chances of VBAC success, despite what the overarching theme seems to be in our culture of fear, as I call it, that causes a lot of moms to have a VBAC, but it's heavily medicalized and sometimes even more traumatic than a repeat C-section, versus the moms that are attempting to have a VBAC and they start to feel all that pressure to have a repeat C-section, versus those moms that wanted a VBAC but were talked out of it, versus the moms that were like, I don't want to go through labor again because of all these things that happened. My body doesn't work. I'll just schedule that C-section, so that you really fully understand that. So that's what's coming up next. And if you want to go deeper, I do encourage you to go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide. I encourage you to get on the newsletter as well, especially if you are an empowered mom and you have that mindset of, I deserve better. I deserve to have a beautiful birth experience. And then beyond birth, you deserve to have the most extraordinary life as a mom. You deserve to have it as a woman. You deserve to have a creative life. So with Empowering Moms, I basically believe that it's three main components. There's yourself, so trusting yourself and taking care of yourself, that's self-care. And then the next level is your family and connection and your relationships and your friendships. And then the third level is the creative life and giving back to others and doing what you came here to do. You don't need to sacrifice your dreams on the altar of motherhood, and you don't need to sacrifice your body on the altar of motherhood, and you deserve to have an empowered birth. So the thing is that our birth culture has really been based on this idea of supermom and mommy martyr. I am looking to change that around. So part of the Empowering Moms Birth brand is that whether you're birthing a baby, birthing a business or a creative project, a movement, a new version of yourself, all of the things that you learn from your empowered birth and from birthing your baby in your power, you can take to other aspects of your life. A lot of my clients have also gone on to choose to go back to school, to go for the career that they had put on hold. A lot of moms also choose to birth businesses or even help their kids create their own businesses. And a lot of moms also recognize that they can have a more connected relationship with their partner or leave someone who's not serving them. Even before they enter motherhood, anyone who's watching the videos following the Empowering Moms Birth brand, they tend to have those aha moments. So whether this is your first time watching me, whether this is your second time, whether you've been following me for a while, remember my motto is that if you found value in this, please pay it forward, pass this on to other moms. A drop in the ocean creates ripples. Many ripples create waves, and enough waves can change the tide. Here at Empowering Moms, I'm all about changing the tide. So thank you so much again. Have a happy, empowered birth journey, and I will see you next week. Namaste.